Hello again. The massive operation by RAF Bomber Command to attack the great dams in the Ruhr, which supplied Nazi heavy industry, at the time was a massive morale boost in Britain. And even decades later, something that's still intrigues us and has captured our interest. American viewers probably won't be familiar with it, but the equivalent would probably be the Doolittle raids on Tokyo. The first book, The Dambusters, by Paul Brickhill, he was an Australian who flew as RAF aircrew, and he crashed. He was shot down and spent time in Stalag Luft 3. Which was the subject of another of his books, Grey's Escape, which is another iconic movie. He had access to a lot of primary sources at the time. The survivors were still alive and got a lot of good material. Unfortunately, some of the material was still secret, and a lot of the writing in a lot of the war books at the time painted a rather rosy picture and tended to sort of gloss over any errors, bureaucratic snarl-ups, personality clashes, and that kind of thing. In particular, Guy Gibson, who led the raid, was portrayed as being a very popular leader, and when they started the squadron to lead the perform the raid, it suggested that some of his old comrades flocked to fly with him, and this is quite far from the truth. So more. Later on, more books came out which were somewhat revisionist, and they painted Guy Gibson as being a martinet and unpopular, and particularly unpopular with the NCOs. Also, the books questioned the efficiency and the effect of the raid. Now, two of the books that I'm referring to now, they're not the revisionist types. One is by James Holland, The Dambusters Raid, and he has written many books on wartime aviation and battles and so on. He's a great popular historian, and he does a podcast with Al Murray, the comedian, who's also heavily into military history, which I listen to, and it's very informative. So he has written a very balanced account. And the other book, Chastise, the name of the operation was Operation Chastise, the Dams Raid, by Max Hastings, who's similarly a very good historian, written many books. One of his previous books was on Bomber Command, and he unearthed lots of interesting facts, such as in the 1920s, the RAF's targets packages were against France. So, it just goes to show that you can't predict who you're going to be fighting in the future and what you're going to need, which is still a relevant topic today with defence cuts. Anyway, a couple of the things that when I first read Chastise, that struck me about Guy Gibson was that he had, when they first proposed the Dams raid, and they were looking for a commander, and they went to Guy Gibson. He had already completed 2 tours in Bomber Command. A tour was 30 missions, and you were statistically unlikely to survive a tour. the death rate was that much. So to survive 2 tours, and he actually did more than 2 tours, did a few more. Plus he did almost 100 missions as a night fighter pilot. So he was really due a rest, and that's what was in line for him when Bomber Command asked him to stand up a new squadron for a special secret mission, and he didn't hesitate. He accepted. Now this he was obviously a real warrior and very patriotic and a strong sense of duty, and he was a martinet, and his relations with particularly with working class and other ranks left a lot to be desired. But he was only 24 years old, and his upbringing, the usual British public school type thing, which turns people into emotional cripples, basically, had a lot to blame for that. So I'm not as hard on Guy Gibson after reading these books as many of the revisionist histories prior had been. You can understand, you've got to put it into the context. He's a young man, and he had this fantastic wartime experience. So anyway, he was asked to stand up this squadron, which at first was called Squadron X and became 617 Squadron. And they didn't know it, but they were going to attack the dams. Now, the idea of attacking the dams, again, Paul Brickhill suggested that Barnes-Wallace came up with the idea, and that's kind of the popular view. He didn't. There was actually a committee. British government had a committee to look at attacking the dams because they were such a juicy target. They supplied the water and they supplied the hydroelectricity to the Ruhr industries, which all the massive industries, armaments, vehicles, and so on, aircraft and so on. So there was no doubt that the target was attractive, but there was no means of attacking it, because attacking a dam is almost a vertical target. So attacking it from the air, dropping bombs onto it's obviously not going to do anything. So you would need something like a torpedo type attack, but the dams were protected by booms and torpedo netting, so that was a no-goer. What Barnes-Wallace did see the idea of attacking the dams, but he also came up with the method of doing it, the weapon, and he came up with what became known as the bouncing bomb. And the idea was, which came from skimming stones over a pond, which is exactly where he got the idea from, was to drop the bomb in a way that it would bounce over the obstacles, hit the dam wall, and then the bomb was, this is all clever stuff, designed with a rearward rotation, so it would hit the dam wall and be driven down. And then at a certain depth, the hydrostatic trigger would detonate, and the pressure of the water as well would add to the effect of the explosion. And they calculated they could breach the dam using this weapon. So he was involved in testing this weapon, because the theory is fantastic, but how do you achieve it? And it was a very complex calculation of the dropping height, the airspeed, and the design of the bomb. And they got everything wrong at first. The bomb he encased in a wooden shroud, thinking that was necessary, and it just exploded. The wood exploded every time they hit the water. And then he found out that the actual bomb itself would carry on, so they got rid of the wood. Anyway, they were doing these tests, and it's to the credit of the Air Ministry that they allowed them to go on so long with lots of failure, until they came up with one that worked, and it was right at the last minute, the design that worked. Meanwhile, 617 Squadron was without knowing the target, was flying over the lakes in Derbyshire, the reservoirs in Derbyshire at night, very low level. And they were flying at something like 120 feet, which is very, very low, over unfamiliar terrain. And the rumour control inside the squadron was that they would be, because they were going over water, attacking the Tirpitz, which was the huge German battleship which was hiding in a Norwegian fjord. Anyway, Gibson was brought in on the secret, and then eventually the whole squadron was briefed. And the only aircraft that could have done this was the Lancasters, which is what 617 were equipped with. But it had to be highly modified. They had to build a cradle in the bomb bay to carry the weapon, which is a cylindrical, rather like a large oil drum. It weighed 9,000 pounds. And it had to rotate with an electrical motor and a belt drive to rotate it backwards at 500 revs. So it was a very complex thing. And they started the electric motor in flight, and the vibration apparently was horrendous within the Lancaster. Now, at the time, the Lancaster was a massive 4-engine bomber. If you see one now on the ground, and I've been up close to Lancaster in museums, it doesn't look that big compared to our modern aircraft, but at the time, that's what they had. And so it was very, very subject to vibration and so on. Barnes-Wallis then hit them with a real dilemma, because the tests had determined that the bomb, which was codenamed Upkeep, had to be dropped at 60 feet. So they really started low-level training, and one of the books recounts that one of the Lancasters on a low-level training flight was amazed when another Lancaster flew underneath it. They were flying so low. So the raid commences. It's in 3 waves. Very detailed briefing, as all the RAF raids were at the time. And off they go to the Ruhr. And the first wave is attacking the Mona Dam, led by Gibson. He's leading the first wave. And he drops his bomb, and no effect. Now, they were taking very heavy flak. All the dams they had towers with anti-aircraft weapons. So what Gibson decided was he would fly in parallel to the next Lancaster to attack, to draw away the anti-aircraft fire, which he did. And then he did it to the succeeding attacks, even switching on his navigation lights to attract more attention away from the actual attacking aircraft. Amazing bravery and dedication. Eventually, the dam's breached, and the ones who haven't dropped the bomb, they all fly off to the Ada Dam and have a go at that, and that is breached. The third dam, the Sorpe, is is a different construction. It's made of earth. It can't be it's not really suitable for the upkeep weapon. Conventional weapons would have probably been better, but that was a mistake, and that wasn't breached. The loss, there was 19 aircraft on the mission, and 8 were lost, 53 aircrew, and it was regarded as a success when they got back. Photo reconnaissance confirmed that the Mona and the Ada dams had been breached. Air Vice Marshal Harris, who was the commander of Bomber Command, immediately took credit for it, even though he had been very skeptical and dismissed the whole idea as tripe. Bomber Harris didn't like anything which detracted from the area bombing of German cities. His ambition was to basically set Germany alight. And there was a lot of doubt about this campaign later in the war. At first, everyone embraced it, but then really questions started being asked. Anyway, that's the subject of another book, really. And Max Hastings' Bomber Command goes into that very, very fully. So Harris took a lot of the credit for the success. Massive propaganda, massive morale boost to the British people at the time. The Paul Brickhill book, and together with the memoirs of Guy Gibson, Enemy Coast Ahead. Guy Gibson was awarded the VC, by the way, for his work. Very, very rightly so, obviously. He was then sent on publicity tours, but returned to operations at his own request, and he was flying Mosquitoes and was killed on operations. So it's really tragic. But then they filmed Paul Brickhill's book, with a script based on the book and Enemy Coast Ahead, and with Richard Todd starring as Guy Gibson, who was a fantastic choice for the role. Very handsome, good actor, very well known British actor, and he had served in the war in the parachute regiment, and he'd taken part in the D-Day parachute drop to capture Pegasus Bridge, and he's actually in the movie The Longest Day, and he doesn't actually play himself in it, but he plays another airborne officer in it. I think he portrayed the military officer very, very well, because he'd been one. Very authentic movie. They filmed it at RAF Scampton, which was the base of 617. They had still flying Lancasters there, so they had access to them. So they didn't need to use special effects like they would now. What special effects they did was kind of drawing anti-aircraft fire on the film, and the model dams that they used were breached. But it looked great at the time. We all enjoyed it, and it's definitely always in the top any list of top British war films. The Dambusters probably in the top 3, I would say. And for a lot of people, it's number 1. It's shown all the time. It's on the TV all the time. It was a really good film. After the Dams raid, 617 went on to attack the Tirpitz. They did that. They flew in via Russia. They had to stage in Russia and refuel, landing in some swamp in Russia. And John Nichols had written a book about that, what the Dambusters did next. Very, very good. And they did attack the Tirpitz with another Barnes-Wallis weapon, the Tall Boy. And they attacked V2 launching sites with the Grand Slam weapon as well. So they were kept as a specialised unit. Leonard Cheshire, who was also a Victoria Cross winner, became the commander. So all in all, I don't expect everyone to read all the books, but and I couldn't really recommend any one over the other. Chastise is really good. James Holland book, really good. It's up to you. Have a look at them. Have a look at the reviews on Amazon. Pick what you want, because it's a story that needed telling, and I think all generation should be aware of it, what they did, sacrifices they made, and one thing, Chastise does go into the effects on the German population, the destruction there. That was catastrophic for them also. And James Holland goes into things like the actual value of the raid, which he said it was well worth doing. It did have a big impact. Albert Speer did say it was a devastating blow, but the Germans adapted very, very well and started rebuilding. And even Speer couldn't understand why the RAF didn't attack again, because while they were rebuilding it, there were so many resources used in the rebuilding that the RAF could have attacked and got rid of all those resources too. So a fantastic story, and one is really an essential part of our wartime history.